Hey everybody, it's Gil here with the Sailing Vessel Dream Chaser. And in last week's episode, Deb and I spent a little bit of time talking about some of our thoughts about our move to Florida, why we want to go to Florida, specifically 4 reasons we want to go. And then we also talked a little bit about the fact that we were sort of exploring options. Do we want to look at a marina, or do we want to look at maybe waterfront lots? In this week's episode, we'll show you a little bit about our trip to Florida while we started to look at properties, look at marinas, and look at waterfront lots. We also spent some time with the family, did a little bit of kayaking in the mangrove tunnels, which was a blast. We did it with glass-bottom canoes. Unfortunately, the water was a little murky, so we couldn't see a lot down below, but it was a really cool experience, and we look forward to doing more of that stuff too.
Well, we got the camper all loaded up, filled up with gas, and headed out. We drove for about 8 hours after Chastity got out of school on Friday, and we stopped somewhere along the way at a rest stop for a few hours of rest, and then finally crossed the Sunshine Skyway Bridge just down by between Tampa Bay and St. Pete, and then got the camper set up and ready to go.
We're doing a little shopping. I got my assistant here pushing the cart today. How you doing back there?
Good.
All right.
Pushing the cart.
So Deb and I started just north of Tampa is where we started looking, so sort of the area around Tampa Bay. The first place we looked at was actually in Apollo Beach, which is on the east side of Tampa Bay. Small little development just south of Tampa, but north of Bradenton and Sarasota. It happened to be the first one we looked at, literally the very first property search we did and looked at, and it was right by this large power plant, which is where a lot of the manatees come in. When the water's cold, they come up by the power plants for the warm water discharge. So we went over to that area and we found this place, older home for sure, price scary, but probably doable. You know, mortgage would probably run us about a little more than twice what a slip rent would. And, you know, it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home with a garage, dock, waterfront. Right across the waterway was a nature preserve, so mangrove sort of islands there. You wouldn't have to worry about anything being planted there. The downside was when you look out the backyard off the deck or off the Florida sunroom, you would see the mangroves and then the big steam stacks from the power plant that's behind it. So not the prettiest of views, but it looked like it might be deep enough water, at least based on a couple of people we talked to that lived in that neighborhood off those canals.
So after seeing the Tampa Electric steam stacks from the property, we decided to drive over there knowing that manatees like to come up to the water discharge area when the water in the Gulf of Mexico is cold. This is how they warm up. Tampa Electric has a manatee viewing area, which was pretty cool. There's a nature walk that goes out on a dock, which is what we're on here. And then there's a spot where you can walk out over the water where the little inlet is and see the manatees in there. We didn't actually see any this day. The water was a little too warm.
So the next place we looked was an area that's north of Clearwater. It's called Port Richey or Hudson area. And the deals up there were a lot better. I mean, larger homes, less money, typically not bulkhead sides on the canals, so sort of a rock slide side, deep water in the channels. But when you look at the charts, it almost looks like if you don't take the channel all the way out to about the 3 nautical mile range offshore, it's only 6 feet deep going into that, at the 3 nautical mile range. So it seemed risky to me. I think we really need to go depth sound it out to make sure. The challenge is if you've ever watched the TV show Live PD, a lot of stuff is in Pasco County. Those 2 places are in Pasco County. So we're not really sure we want to do that. When we looked at the schools, not very good either. I know we intend to try homeschooling, but the reality is we want to make sure that we have a decent schooling option too.
Having my early morning coffee, sitting outside. Not a bad little spot. Not a bad spot at all. It sure does look like it's going to storm this morning.
Not real sure what it is that these birds are, but we saw them the whole time. They would walk along the edge of the waterway or even in the grass, and they just have these long curved beaks. I guess they're digging worms or something out of the ground, but it was kind of interesting watching them. And they would walk right up within just a couple of feet of where I was sitting. It was pretty kind of interesting, if nothing else. So the next place we looked was in an area called Placida. It's a little south of Tampa. It's just north of Charlotte Harbor. It's on an island called Don Pedro Island, and the entry was really cool. You take this little road in. You actually have to take a ferry to the property. There is no bridges that go to it, so it's kind of an in and out, like it was almost like an embedded curfew, if you will. But you can see how narrow the water was, so you could just take a dinghy across. But the first house we went to was strictly a wish house. The realtor took us to it. It was right on the beach. The girls, it started to rain, so we kind of sat on the porch here and just hung out with the realtor chatting for a little while. And the girls played along the beach, picking up shells and whatnot in the rain. They loved it. It was just gorgeous. And then we took another drive down to a second property that we were looking at. It was a very small home. This was, believe it or not, a 900 square foot home, 1 bedroom, 1 bath. But the outdoor living area was just phenomenal. It had outdoor showers and outdoor kitchens all underneath the raised house. This is what the property looks like. And you can see there's a style developing here. We like these ones with a lot of trees around them. I think that's kind of a neat look. Gives a little bit of shade to the yard and hides it out a little bit. But you might be able to see in this photo as we rotate overhead that the water behind it had some shallow spots right here. And in the end, this property wasn't going to work because of the water depth. I was really disappointed because I think of all the properties, this was one of our favorites. Certainly some challenges with the island living. That would be a challenge for sure, but it was definitely a cool property and love the closeness to the ocean.
Wow. I see you.
So she loves doing goofy things on the camera, and then if we're not home, she sends us a text and says, "Oh, look at the cameras at 10:24 a.m." So it's her way of entertaining herself when she's by herself, apparently. So the next area we looked in was Punta Gorda. Punta Gorda is further south. It's not on Tampa Bay. It's actually on the northern side of what they call Charlotte Harbor or Gasparilla Sound. It's actually on the north side of Gasparilla Sound where the Peace River kind of comes off of it. It'd be a much shorter sail to the Gulf of Mexico from there than it would be for where we are here. Just crossing Lake Pontchartrain would be significantly larger, a larger sail than what we were looking at there. We like that area. This is the area we went to last year. The water's clearer. I really liked Charlotte Harbor, the body of water. There's a bunch of little islands out there, Boquilla Island and Pine Island and Don Pedro Island, and there's just a ton of places where you can just anchor out and kayak or in mangrove islands or dinghy around or swim, whatever it happens to be. Really nice area.
So the next day we went ahead and looked in an area called Port Charlotte. So Port Charlotte's on the north end of Charlotte Harbor, right across the water from Punta Gorda. And you can see it's a series of housing areas with all canals behind it. So we had some high hopes. And the first house we went to, we were greeted by Buddha. I had to explain a little bit to McKinley who Buddha was. But this house was okay. It's funny, the number of houses that when you go through, they're just completely staged. There's so many sort of snowbirds, people that live in the north and come down during the winter and stay in Florida at this time of year. Most of these houses seem to be vacant, so the realtor was just going through them, and you can see they're sparsely staged for either renting out or for when the owners come back. This one had a nice little pool in the backyard under a lanai. That was pretty nice. However, you'll see a theme starting to form here as we look at houses, and that comes to the water itself. This house was on the end of a cul-de-sac, so the property lines were a very unique shape, and in the end, not enough room for the boat. So this is another one we looked at in the Port Charlotte area, and I didn't film all of them, but this one was actually really dated. It had a very interesting look as we went in. I wasn't sure what was going on with the floors. They were sort of this like, kind of like today's like garages would be epoxy, but I think it's that old thing, you know, I think about the 70s in a school or a public building. It looked like that, but there was glue lines down, like somebody had pulled up linoleum. And it had a good-sized garage, as you can see. It's easily wide enough for 2 cars. It was very dated. You know, you look at the appliances and the countertops, and just everything in it was extremely dated. I don't know if you can see this as we kind of walk by that bathroom, and it's pink and white tile. The rooms were fairly small, but certainly serviceable. If it was in a better location, it might be able to be rented out as an Airbnb or something like that. But as this was, it probably wasn't too good for that either. It had some fairly large open areas, and then as you walked outside, it had this sort of covered patio, which was nice. And then you step out from the covered patio into a lanai. It looked like they probably had an outdoor bar or hot tub set up here, and then you kind of go out the screened lanai into the backyard. The challenge with this one, again, the water seemed awful shallow. It was about 4 feet right off the edge of the bulkhead, and maybe 10 or 12 feet out it would have been okay, but I couldn't tell.
So we've looked at a couple of them now, and it was time to check out another one in Port Charlotte. Believe it or not, the prices in Port Charlotte were pretty reasonable, and this one seemed like a good opportunity where it was. Okay, this is over by Morgan Lane in Port Charlotte. There's a place right at the edge of this lake and one on the end of the canal on a Cosley Street or something. It looks like it's low tide, but there are some good-sized sailboats in here. I'm walking up an empty lot right now toward the water.
As I got close to the water, despite the fact that there were large boats just to my left here, the water was only about a foot deep right here at the edge of the rock wall. The location was really promising. It's the house where the icon is, and you can see the ones on the end are the high dollar ones, but it was right on this little lake. This little lake right here was even listed in his inactive captain as a really good anchorage to get out of the weather if you needed to. So before having checked that depth, the realtor told us, hey, I have one over here that is listed with sailboat access, deep water, direct Gulf access. So we were pretty excited about this one here. The house was in pretty good shape, too. You can tell it, again, another one that was staged, but a little bit dated, but not bad. The odd thing was these metal shutter doors in all the closets, but that could be replaced. And it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It had an interesting garage. So I'm actually in this garage. It's tandem. You open the door to the front and to the back. So I'm from the back walking forward now. It's almost like it's been added on. And as you go through this door, there's sort of a second garage, one for the car there. And then you step into the house, into the kitchen from the garage. And you can see the nice open sort of floor plan. As you go from the sort of long kitchen to this big dining room. And then so many of these houses have what they call a Florida room. It's just essentially a hard roof with a screened-in area.
Let's go.
You gonna come show me?
McKinley got a kick out of this room that had the little screened-in porch side to it, and the waterfront was great. About 150 feet of waterfront access along it with a couple of davits. So pretty exciting, but we checked it later, 4 feet deep.
We found some homes in Punta Gorda. Pretty nice. Actually, I would say nicer than the other places we looked for sure. I think one of the challenges we would have is Deb and I would like to be able to stay on the boat from time to time and Airbnb the house if we wanted to. It's probably against ordinances there. It's a housing residential neighborhood as opposed to a little bit more country, if you will, or a little bit more rustic. So I don't know how well that's going to work, but we like the Punta Gorda area. So Punta Gorda, Spanish for a fat tip. So it's a fat tip of land that sticks out into the Peace River and the Gasparilla Sound.
So I could bore you with all of the details here, but I will say we looked at several places, a lot of really nice places actually in Punta Gorda. I still like the area. I'm a bit nervous about the depth. I'm not sure about getting out of this location to the Gulf of Mexico from here.
It looks like our sailboat.
So what we really needed was a break. It was beginning to get a little bit mind-numbing just looking at house after house after house. After a while, they all start to look the same, and frankly, you'd get a hey, this was a really good one. Look at sailboat access, direct Gulf. and then you get over there and you look down off the bulkhead and you can see the bottom and 3 feet of water. So what we've really found out was realtors know a lot about the housing market. They're really, really helpful there, but what they don't really understand a lot about, the majority of them, I don't want to paint too broad a brush, but the majority don't quite understand water depth and needs for a sailboat, etc. And you know, you tell them what the draft is, but they don't necessarily know. So it certainly is incumbent upon us to make sure that whatever we end up selecting works for us. In the end, we just needed a break. We wanted to take the girls, do a couple of little fun things, go to the beach, do some kayaking. So we'll take you along on that. I think we'll end this video here for this week. We'll see you again next week while we show you the one we really, really liked. We get back on the boat, again, finishing up some work, enjoying our time, living back on the boat again from the camper, which, yay, it's been such a nice change for a little bit here. So anyway, see y'all. Safe sailing. Bye now.